Hi everyone! I thought since it was unlikely we're all going to be able to get together before the end of term, it would be nice if I finished reading you Bill's new Frock, as I know lots of you are enjoying the story. And it is quite a funny story about a boy waking up one morning wearing a dress, and nobody seems to think this is strange. But when he goes to school, he experiences things very differently because he's wearing this dress. The teachers say he's more responsible and he's got neat handwriting. The boys don't let him join in with football and they say go onto the girls' side of the playground. So Bill is experienced being treated like a girl and he's finding it all very confusing and strange. Anyway, there's only 3 more chapters left, so I thought I'd do one a week or something, and I hope you enjoy it. This chapter is called The Big Fight. It rained all through the lunch hour. The sky went grey, the windows misted over, and from overhead came the steady gunfire sound of huge raindrops pinging smartly on the skylight. And Mrs. Collins slipped into one of her dark, wet break moods. Everyone knew the signs. The eyebrows knitting together over her nose, the lines across her forehead deepening to furrows, her lips thinning into tightened purse strings. Everyone knew it was not the time to cause trouble. So as the rain beat heavily against the window panes, everyone crept quietly around the classroom, trying to look as if they were up to something useful or sensible, or at the very least quiet. And out of the storeroom came the old comic box. Nobody meant to make a great noise and a fuss. All anyone wanted to do was to go to the box, dip in their hand and pick out a couple of comics they liked. Nobody meant to end up in a scrum, pushing and shoving the others out the way, using their elbows, desperate to get an arm in and whip out the best comic before anyone else got it. Nobody meant to end up in a riot. "Silence!" roared Mrs. Collins. "Go back to your places at once. I will give out the comics myself." As she came over, everyone melted away from the comic box and drifted back to their favourite wet break places. Delilah and Kirsty sat side by side on the fat radiator pipes, Flora perched on the windowsill, and Philip and Nicky sprawled on the floor beneath table 5. And Bill, who probably would have joined his friends on any other day, glanced down at the marks and smears and tears that he already had on his pretty pink frock, and then at the muddy grime and footprints all over the floor where his friends were, and thought better of it. He settled himself alone, leaning his chair back against the wall and waiting for Mrs. Collins to hand round the comics. They were a shabby and dog-eared lot. It was with a slight shudder of disgust that Mrs. Collins dipped her fingers in the box to lift them out and started round the room. Like everyone else, Bill hoped so hard that she would go round his way first, but he was out of luck. She went the other way. It took her ages. All of the Beanos went first, then the Dandies, she gave out the Hotspur and the Lion, and then several Bunties and some Victors. By the time she reached Bill Simpson, there was very little left. "Mandy," she offered him, "or would you prefer a June or a Judy?" Now, let's be clear, this is quite an old book, and in those days, there was magazines, children's magazines like we have now, but there was very much boy-type ones and girl-type ones. So the ones that are left and that she's offering him are all the girly ones, which obviously isn't going to please him very much. He could tell from a look on her face that she wasn't in a mood for a discussion, so he contented himself with replying, "I'll have Thunder, please, or a Hornet." "No more Hornet," she said, leafing through the last comics. "No Thunders either." She gave him a Bunty. "There you are, you'll enjoy this one." And off she went back to her desk. Bill glanced down at the comic in his hands. He didn't like the look of it at all. He didn't want to read this. What use was a Bunty? He wanted a Beano or a Dandy or a Thunder, and that was that. Melissa was sitting only a few feet away, reading a Beano. Bill leant across. "Hey, Melissa, here's a Bunty with all the pages and no torn bits. Do you want to swap?" Melissa gazed at him over her comic, her eyes widening even more as she realised he was serious. "You must be joking," she said, and went back to her Beano. Bill tried the other side. Flora was sitting on a Dandy and reading another one. "Flora," called Bill, "would you like a Bunty?" "No, thank you," Flora said politely, without even looking at him. Bill Simpson decided to have a go with the boys. "Rowan," he hissed, "Rowan, I'll swap you my practically brand new comic for your tatty old Valiant with hardly any pages left." "What is your comic?" asked Rowan. "Is it a Hotspur?" "No," Bill confessed. "It's a Bunty." Rowan just sniggered and went back to his comic. Clearly he thought it was a joke. Bill tried one last time. "Martin," he offered, "will you swap with me as soon as you've finished your Victor?" Martin said, "Sure, what have you got?" Bill said as softly as he could, "A Bunty." "What?" Martin said. "What?" So Bill Simpson had to tell him over again. Martin snorted. "No thanks, I'll swap with Melissa's Beano instead." And he went back to reading. Bill blamed Mrs. Collins, frankly. He couldn't prove it and he wouldn't ask, but he firmly suspected that if he had not been wearing the pretty pink frock, he would never have ended up with the Bunty. Mrs. Collins could have easily arranged things another way. She might have got Flora to give him the dandy she was sitting on to keep him going, or she might have suggested to Rowan that Bill and he sit close together to read the Valiant together. He couldn't prove it, no, he couldn't prove it, but he felt sure about it all the same. Clearly there was nothing to be done now. It was too late. Everyone else was reading quietly, and Mrs. Collins didn't look as if she would take kindly at any complaints. He could either waste the whole lunch break trying to swap, or he could just give up and read the Bunty. He read the Bunty. And it wasn't that bad. He read the story about the sneaky school teacher who switched the exam papers around so that her own spoilt and lazy daughter could win the one and only college place. He read the story about the brave orphan gypsy girl who led her lame pony all night through a dangerous war zone. And he was still quite absorbed in a very funny tale of 3 girls who'd somehow found themselves responsible for an enormous hippopotamus with an even more enormous appetite when a shadow fell over the page. Flora was holding out a dandy. "Want to swap?" "In a minute, let me finish this story." "Now or never," said Flora. "All right then," said Bill. A little sadly, because he wouldn't have minded what was happening to know what the hippo ate next, Bill handed over his Bunty and took the dandy. No sooner had he turned the first page than yet another shadow fell over him, and it was Rowan standing by his side. "Here, you take this and I'll have that." "No thanks," said Bill, and he went back to reading. "Come on," said Rowan, "don't be mean. Swap comics with me. I don't want this one." "Well, I don't want it either." "You haven't read it. I'm reading this." And Bill shook his dandy in Rowan's face. That was his first big mistake. His second big mistake was not moving fast enough when Rowan tried to snatch it. Rowan's grip tightened over the top of the comic. "Let go of my dandy." "Don't be so mean." "Mean? Why should I give you my dandy and take your rotten June?" "Because you might like it," said Rowan, "and I definitely won't." The penny dropped. It was the frock again. Bill couldn't believe it. Hadn't the morning been bad enough? Now, was even his lunch break going to be ruined because he just happened to be wearing this stupid, silly curse of a dress? If this was the sort of thing that kept happening to you if you came to school in a frilly pink frock, no wonder all the girls wore jeans. Bill Simpson had had quite enough. "Let go of my comic," he warned Rowan. "Let go of it, or I shall mash you." In answer to this threat, Rowan tugged harder. The dandy began to tear. "Let go," repeated Bill Simpson. Rowan pulled harder. Bill Simpson hit him. He clenched his fist and punched Rowan on the shoulder as hard as he could. Rowan yelped in pain and dropped his half of the comic. Though his heart was thumping so fiercely his eyes couldn't settle on the pictures, let alone read the print, Bill Simpson pretended he had calmly gone back to his dandy. Until Rowan kicked him. In fact, his foot didn't touch Bill at all. It tangled in the folds of the pretty pink dress, but it did leave a great black criss-cross footprint on the flimsy material, and it was a kick. Bill was furious. He leapt to his feet and started hitting Rowan as hard as he could. Rowan put up his own fist to defend himself, and within seconds they were having a fight. The noise was tremendous. Everyone in the classroom started at once, some asking who started the fight, some egging on one side or another, some telling both of them to stop. Then as the blows rained down on either side, everyone fell silent, for this was the first really big fight ever seen in the classroom itself, and it was shocking. No one was ever surprised to see the odd sly kick on someone's ankle. Everyone had noticed the occasional deliberate tripping up or hard nudge, but nothing like this. Not a real big fight. Never. It was Mrs. Collins who put a stop to it. Striding across the room in a fury, she grasped both of them by the shoulder and hauled them apart. Both were scarlet with rage. "How dare you!" shouted Mrs. Collins. "How dare you!" She was enraged too. No one had ever seen her looking so angry. Her dark, wet-break mood had turned so fierce she looked fit to kill. Her eyes were flashing, her nose gone pointy, and her mouth shrunk to a lemon-sucking sliver. "How dare you!" Rowan and Bill stood glowering at one another. "What is going on? Who started this fight?" "It wasn't my fault," snarled Rowan. "I didn't start it." "You did," snarled Bill, clenching his fist. "You kicked me." He showed the footprint on his pretty pink frock. "You punched me first," insisted Rowan, rubbing his shoulder, trying to get some sympathy. But Mrs. Collins wasn't impressed. She didn't even appear to have heard what Rowan said. She was busy leaning over to look at the footprint on Bill Simpson's frock. "This is shocking, Rowan," she said. "Shocking! To leave a footprint as clear as this on the frock. You must have lashed out really hard with your foot." "I was punched first." But Rowan's wailing did him no good. A look of scorn came over Mrs. Collins' face. Though she said nothing out loud, you could almost hear her thinking, how could a little thump on the shoulder from someone in a pink dress cause a great big kick from someone wearing heavy boots? So, thought Bill Simpson to himself, there can be one advantage to wearing a dress. It didn't last for long, though. She punished them both. She put them at neighbouring desks and made them write "Fighting is stupid and fighting is ugly" in their best handwriting over and over and over again until the bell rang. They sat with exactly the same look on their faces. Both were still furious at the unfairness of it all. To everyone else, they looked for the world like a pair of scowling and bad-tempered twins. And every now and again, someone would tiptoe past and whisper in Rowan's ear, "You look so angry." But in Bill's, they whispered, "You look so upset." Okay, and I'll record another chapter in a few days. Take care, everyone. Bye.